Chakun strikes again, and the man hit by it awakens as Grace Auburn. Having woken up as the daughter of the Duke of Auburn, his mind was still that of a 52-year-old civil servant from his previous life. Falling from her horse and hitting her head, I don't know, remembered everything. With some fellows checking on his fall, he now remembered this was the world of a game where one could enjoy romances with many handsome men. Of course, we know this as an ultimate game. His last memory from his old life was pushing a little boy out of the way of a truck. This was an instance of reincarnation into another world. But why did he, Kenzaburo Tondabayashi, a 52-year-old government worker, have to be reincarnated as the daughter of a duke in an ultimate game? This was too much of a mismatch, even as a joke by the gods. He had enough otaku knowledge to know this reincarnated to another world thing, but he didn't know a single thing about ultimate games. How was he supposed to survive? Suddenly, one of his servants, Josette, came in nervously sweating as she brought Lady Grace her change of clothes. With Grace thanking her, the servant backed away frightened, bumping her head against the door before leaving the clothes and scurrying off. As Grace, he still had the memory of how he used to be until now. Grace had quite a strict personality, always scolding her servants and never thanking them even once. In other words, his role in this life was the villainess of this very ultimate game world. The TV blared with that very villainous saying, "Know your place. This academy is no place for a commoner like you to set foot so brazenly." That was when Kenza had walked in on his daughter, Hinako, playing the game he was in now, Magical Academy, Love and Beast. He could tell it was an ultimate because of all the handsome guys on the cover, and teased his daughter somewhat for playing it in the living room. The daughter was a proud otaku, telling her father about Grace, the villainess who stood in the protagonist's way. The father had some knowledge on this, commenting on how the heroine's rival with spiral curls had been a staple since the 70s, like Ayumi Himekawa from Glass Mask, Madame Butterfly from Aim for the Ace, and Eliza Legan from Candy Candy. Yes, I had to look these all up to understand the references. This guy was a little too old, given both his daughter and I had no idea what he was rambling on about. Comparing that moment to Grace's memory, he was certain this world was almost exactly like the one in the ultimate game Magical Academy Love and Beast. Right now, he was Grace Auburn, the villainess. And starting today, he was a student at the Royal Academy of Magic. He saw a sparkly pink-haired girl, brimming with hope, suddenly trip, spectacularly face-planting. He perceived her as a clumsy girl that the players could easily sympathize with. Anna Doll was undoubtedly the protagonist of this ultimate game. Kenza had a memory of his daughter explaining Anna being excited about her first day at the academy, but Grace stood in her way because she was a commoner, when most who attended were nobles like Grace. First, Grace had lectured Anna about their difference in social status, and even insulted Anna's beloved family, pushing her to tears. That moment made Anna resolve to study magic hard to prove Grace wrong. Remembering this, Kenza still contemplated on why he was the one who had to be reincarnated into this game world. With Grace stopping Anna, the other students spoke in hushed whispers about Grace's family being the most powerful in the country after the royal family. Grace knew Anna had passed the entrance exam into the school with the highest score, but instead of degrading the heroine, he told Anna her parents must have been very wise, caring, and loving. Oh no, he forgot to act like a villainess and let his true feelings as a parent slip. Anna looked down, crying with tears of joy and gratefulness towards her parents. She never thought someone with a noble status as high as Grace's would say something so kind to her. Grace was stun-locked. The other students watching misinterpreted the situation, thinking Grace had made Anna cry by saying something harsh. So, he dragged Anna away as quickly as he could. Sitting down on a bench together, Anna apologized for losing her composure. It's just that her family wasn't wealthy, but when they found out she had a talent for magic, they worked so hard to save money. She was thankful for the opportunity to study magic because of them, and touched by Grace's kind words. So, Grace led Anna the correct way, by suggesting the method to repay them. Anna already knew she needed to work hard, then get a good job to give her family a better life. However, that was different from Grace's actual answer. He suggested Anna develop her talents to the fullest and live a happy life. From a parent's perspective, that's what he'd want for his own daughter. Anna shrieked acknowledging Grace was right once again, and that her parents had already said the exact same thing to her. After wiping Anna's tears once more, the blonde boy from earlier teased Grace for making someone cry on the first day. Kenza remembered this handsome boy from Grace's memory. He was one of the romance options for the protagonist. As of now, he was Grace's fiancé and the crown prince of the country, whose name he couldn't remember. He continued to make small talk while concurrently using all of his brain power to remember the prince's name. It's not because he had forgotten the prince's name, but being an older man, he often couldn't remember people's names because he had learned so many names in his lifetime, and couldn't immediately pick out the right one. But with Anna greeting the prince, this was Grace's saving grace. The prince congratulated Anna on her exam score, but unfortunately still did not name himself. This made sense though, since according to Grace's knowledge, there was an unspoken rule that people of high status don't introduce themselves first. He needed to introduce the prince to Anna, otherwise things would seem strange. So, Grace introduced her full title to Anna, and then gave Anna the hint that the man before them was the crown prince, causing Anna to shriek while naming him Royal Highness Crown Prince Virgil Vierge. Exactly what Grace needed. The prince then took off, reminding them not to be late for the entrance ceremony, which also coincidentally reminded Kenza of the course of events. His daughter had told him in the game's story, Anna gets insulted by Grace and cries alone in the courtyard. Then meets Prince Virgil, who calms her down. This was the first necessary event for the prince ending. He now wondered if that ending had just hit the triggered requirement. However, Anna was just happy Grace introduced her as a friend. Hearing now that Anna wanted to refer to her as Miss Grace, he was now concerned he might have triggered some other kind of event. Will you like this video and subscribe to my channel? Oh ho ho ho! Here at my Shoujo Weekly, I've got plenty of stories to share with you, involving graceful, rich villainesses. You might even say I've got the best villainess stories here on YouTube. I even have a whole playlist you can watch. So come on, hit that subscribe and give me a like. Wandering the halls, Kenza was proud of himself, given no one had noticed he was an old man inside the body of a duke's daughter. An old man in a wizard outfit suddenly welcomes Grace, and from Grace's memories, Kenza knew this old man was the principal. So, reflexively, he acted the way he would have meeting a principal in his old life, which translated to Grace giving a curtsy and good day to the principal. He was proud of himself once again. He called this elegant cheat skill. And so, Grace finished the opening ceremony as the representative of the freshman students. So far, things have gone just like what he saw at the beginning of the game, and honestly, he was excited to learn about magic. However, the one problem he might have is that the protagonist liked him, when he was supposed to be the villainess. With her non-stop yapping, he told Anna to save her excitement until after their teacher finished her lecture. Anna apologized, and Kenza wondered if what he said sounded enough like a villainess. It was hard for him to be mean to such a sweet girl, but given he was reincarnated as Grace, he needed to act like a villainess as much as possible. Unbeknownst to him though, Anna was lighting up from his statement, thinking of Grace as such a wonderful person. She couldn't believe that even though they had just met, a noblewoman was correcting her shortcomings. Moreover, she believed Grace's behavior was the perfect example of an upper-class lady. Anna felt she needed to work hard not to embarrass Grace, so she needed to learn how to behave at this school from Grace. She noticed Grace looking serious at her textbook, and was looking back and forth between the textbook and the podium. She surmised Grace was imagining what class would be like before it started, and thought of her as amazing. But in reality, Kenza was recalling when going through books, his fingers would slip, so he'd have to often lick them. He was far-sighted and also couldn't see up close. His eyes also took time to adjust focus. But now, as 15-year-old Grace, none of those things were issues. This was simply liberating. While Anna was fixated on following Grace's example, the teacher then suddenly summoned a cabinet, where upon calling the name of a student, they needed to come up to take one of the eggs from inside. In the prince's room, his buddy, August Lion, decided to come in for a chat. August wanted to know which freshman Virgil had decided should join the student council. So, Virgil described members to be chosen based on their grades, family background, and character. He brought up Anna Dahl, who scored the highest on the entrance exam, as a preferred choice. Then, Grace for her grades and family background. August didn't think Grace was a bad choice, but thought of her as very strict. and suggested she might not get along with a commoner like Anna. Initially, the prince was worried about that as well, but now thinks Grace has changed a bit lately. He's decided to keep an eye on her before making a decision. Reaching the school cafeteria, Anna was excited to learn she could eat as much as she wanted here. Grace maintained his composure, despite also being excited by an all-you-can-eat buffet. Using his elegant cheat skill, he conveyed the buffet style to be simply quite wonderful. The two then overheard some girls complaining to the staff. These 3 girls were upset that they had to carry food to their table by themselves because their servants weren't allowed at school, while conveying their parents were counts. The staff member clarified that to be the case, as the academy was principled in making sure the students could cultivate self-reliance and independence in daily life. It was written in their educational policy. Kenza thought the 3 were acting more like spoiled brats than villainesses. As Grace Auburn, he should never emulate them. He had Anna follow her as he carried his own food tray, earning the compliments of the staff member while the 3 girls were losing it. He found the food to be quite delicious, and the 3 nervous girls scurried off in embarrassment. Enjoying the food, he reflected on the fact that while civilization here was similar to that of 19th century Europe, the food and hygiene were that of modern Japan. Nothing like the real world at all. However, the students and teachers here were living beings, so he felt he should treat them with the same respect he'd give anyone. That said, he had only the most basic manners as a commoner. He used to eat everything on his plate, and give thanks for the food, also thanking the chef. He kindly gave his tray to the staff, and gracefully told him to pass on that the food was incredibly delicious to the chef. The girls were in awe over Grace's etiquette. They all wanted to imitate her. In fact, this behavior later became an academy tradition, and thus began the colorful isekai life of Kenzaburo Tondabayashi. Kenza groomed himself every morning, getting ready for work. One day, when exchanging pleasantries with his daughter, he noticed her merchandise mug from Love and Beast, and he was proud because that's exactly what he taught her. They ecstatically fist-bumped to the idea of merchandise truly shining when it was being used, while also having bought extra to be preserved. Heading out, he took note of the trendy design the merch had, as he couldn't read the name on it. He had always tried to use the stairs to keep himself healthy. By not twisting his body and raising his arm and leg on the same side, he could efficiently move without exhausting himself. He learned that from a battle manga he liked. At the city government office, he would sort his papers using an abacus, eat the cafeteria curry every day, and give his thanks and compliments to the chef. When meeting about the design for a city traffic safety PSA poster, his associates had discussed using a popular anime in order to promote it. He got incredibly passionate, because with the characters being cheerful on the poster, it was disrespecting the source material, and this caused him to ramble at a breakneck pace. By 5 o'clock, that was another day of work done. He never asked for much, and he'd do any task given to him. He was happy with his life. But that very evening, he got hit by a truck trying to push a small child out of the way. Now being reincarnated in another world, he intended to fulfill his duty as the person he was reincarnated as. However, he was still unsure of exactly what he had to do. So far, he's managed to adapt to this Ultimate game world. The biggest obstacle was that he didn't know much about Ultimate games. But one thing was clear: these handsome men were the romance options. The prince, as student council president, introduced his friends as fellow members. There was August, the head of the security department, Richard Bersal, the vice president, and Pierre Guimau, the secretary. All the guys were in their second year, and the prince would introduce the girls to the other members at another time. Kenza remembered the boys from the cover of Love and Beast, and surmised the goal of the game was to have Anna, the protagonist, enter a romantic relationship with one of these romance options, and that his role as Grace the Villainess was to interfere with that. Anna clamored, hearing she and Grace were being invited as members of the student council. This wasn't too relevant to Kenza, because he was fixated on how he could interfere with Anna's romance. As a commoner, Anna wondered if it was alright that she was joining, and to that fact, Grace conveyed that student council members were chosen by the president based on their academic performances and family background. And since Anna had the highest exam scores while being a commoner, that was simply proof of her exceptional abilities. August was surprised. He was sure Grace would have said something like, "It would be a disgrace to the school to allow a commoner in the student council." Kenza now realized he messed up by accidentally giving an objective evaluation like the ones for a subordinate performance review. He wished Anna would stop giving him that, "So you meant it when you called me a friend?" look. He had to calm down. Right now, he was Grace Auburn, the Villainess. He shouldn't be satisfied with just keeping the heroine away from the romance options. Coming up with his scheme, he began to giggle. Now telling Anna if she planned to join the student council, she'd have to learn about nobles, manners, and etiquette. And he was going to drill every single bit of those things into her. Ha! That's it. Kenza nailed the perfect oppressive attitude. But with him now adding that he'd thoroughly impart all of his knowledge of noble manners onto her, he could immediately tell he was bad at this whole villainous thing. Anna responded with joy that she'd do her best, and let off a quick glow. As the prince acknowledged Grace's great work, he glowed as well. And so did each of the boys? I wonder if this is like part of an ultimate affection level increase. Outside the council room, as Anna got pumped up for her new student council member role, Kenza considered which romance route she would end up in. Would it be Prince Virgil, the lean, macho, handsome security man, the quiet, long-haired, handsome man, or the diligent, black-haired, handsome man? Kenza could, in fact, not remember all those fancy foreign names at once. Outside for lecture, they began practical magic class using magic circles. The teacher displayed they could write incantations inside the magic circle using the ancient magical alphabet, displaying her spell of light magic particles. One of the students asked an important question. Why didn't they just use regular language for spells? And the teacher explained that the thoughts of non-magic users who could read the words would mix in, dispersing the spell's power. Anna concluded that to use spells to their maximum potential, one needed to use words only they understood. Hearing this, the teacher goes deeper into the lore. Magic circles were used to access the power of words, a power that dwelled within the words themselves. However, for words to contain power, they needed to have history, having been used by many people for many generations. Which is why the ideal words for magic were from the ancient language that were once used, but are no longer used today. This got the gears turning in Kenza's head. He wrote the Japanese word for fire, since kanji didn't exist in this ultimate game world. Then, adding a second one, an intense flame burst, causing Anna to praise him and glow once more. A student in the back got jealous, discounting the power of Grace's spell, since he'd been studying magic circles with a tutor. As Anna was displaying her brightly glowing circle, we hear some students scream as a giant golem appears, causing havoc. Apparently, the jealous student from before had given the golem too much magic and passed out. It was heading their way, being attracted to Anna's magic. Kenza had no choice. He decided to borrow Anna's circle, casting Pause, which brought the golem to a stop. A perfect save. While the teacher scolded the jealous student, he'd be getting a lecture later. Kenza was relieved, because writing in a hurry, he accidentally slightly misspelled the word. But it seems this world still allowed functional spells, despite him writing what could be translated as Pause with a Z. At the Auburn estate, Josette, the maid in training, reflected on how weird Miss Grace had been acting. She thought about how Grace was being so nice. Perhaps the Duke's daughter was scheming, because people always said she looked like an angel, but was a devil inside. These days, though, she overheard her fellow servants speaking about how Grace had become calmer for some reason. However, the maid surmised it wasn't that simple. Like this calm demeanor was more like a calm before a storm. Like, what if she already decided to fire them and she was just being nice until the day she informed them? Akin to fattening livestock before selling them. Josette panicked at the idea. She believed if someone were to get sold, it'd definitely be her because she was the clumsiest. As she dropped and broke a tea kettle in front of Grace, Kenza went to console her, causing her to break into tears thinking she was going to get sold off now. She begged for forgiveness, hysterically asking to at least be sold somewhere she could continue to work as a maid, and that even if Grace decided to eat her, she was sure she wouldn't taste good. Kenza didn't quite get it, until he put together the rumors spreading between the maids lately and his experience as a father. He kindly told Josette he'd never sell her off somewhere. People made mistakes no matter who they were, and reasoned she as a trainee was bound to make more than others. He wouldn't fire everyone who made a mistake, because if he did, no one would become a proper maid. Josette wondered if what had happened was really okay. Kenza figured since Grace had been so strict up until now, the sudden kindness was probably confusing Josette. He decided to be even kinder, offering his treats to the little maid. confusing Josette even more. She initially had hesitation, doubt, confusion, fear, and bewilderment. But taking a bite of the cookie, she totally forgot all her fears in an instant. After that, Grace decided to take the broken kettle to Meister Waltz in order to fix it. The man was a dwarf, and also the official Auburn family craftsman, and seeing the kettle, he was confident it'd only take 20 minutes. Kenza decided to watch the repair job, enjoying the work since dwarves were the finest artisan race in all fantasy worlds. But now seeing the intricate details, he started to wonder if this world was more than just part of an Ultimate game. Seeing the fixed kettle, Josette was amazed. It was as if it had never been broken. The Meister then commented it had been a while since he'd seen Grace, so he got a little fired up. He reminded her of the days when she was little and had come to his shack to watch him all the time. She had always watched him so enthusiastically. Kenza did recognize that memory. Grace liked to watch craftsmen and gardeners work, but when she started receiving formal education as a lady, she gradually stopped doing it because it wasn't ladylike. She grew strict with herself and others and became difficult to deal with, even for the servants. That was what made her into a villainess. However, her true nature had always been much brighter. Looking around the shop and its pleasant atmosphere, she asked Walls if she could visit again, and he of course reminded her this was the garden of her mansion. She could come by whenever she wanted. So on another day, Grace asked him to make her an abacus. The halls of the Royal Magic Academy serve as the setting for the Ultimate game Magical Academy Love and Beast. The student council was an autonomous body led by Prince Virgil and comprised of handpicked students only. However, Kenza couldn't keep up with the names of the guys without them written on a cheat sheet. Nevertheless, this was a school for those of the aristocracy. The members of the council were chosen for their talents and social standing, which meant they'd do their best governing the student body before eventually settling into positions of power that see them ruling over the kingdom. That also made them prime candidates for romancing. One thing in particular Kenza started fixating on in regards to all the love interests in Ultimate games is that they had hairstyles that took up a great deal of data. Their hair was far more elaborate than any of the background characters, leading him to the conclusion that flashy hairstyles were intrinsically linked with popularity in this world. So, is that true? With that in mind, he considered Anna's opinion of their hairstyles should play heavily into who she decides to approach romantically. As Grace, with his hair flowing and sparkling in the wind, he asked Anna how she felt about people with full manes of hair that were kept meticulously groomed. Anna's eyes glimmered. She admitted to idolizing people with gorgeous flowing tresses, but they were not on the same page. Now Kenza was betting on Anna's choice to be the vice president and his long locks. All while Anna was thinking about what Lady Grace did to keep her hair so curly and beautiful. Putting that aside, Kenza's personal hope right now was for Anna to end up with the partner who made her the most happy. He thought back to his daughter telling him the hardest love interest to successfully romance was Prince Virgil. While at first glance, he seemed like a nice guy who gets along with anyone and everyone. However, being raised as the crown prince, he's unable to resist judging other people based entirely on how useful they are to the kingdom, which is why the protagonist had to focus on making her talents shine in the student council to get his attention. Kenza thought that must be rough for both the MC and the prince himself. After all, if he couldn't help but judge even his potential lovers through that lens, then being born as next in line for the throne must be incredibly stressful. While observing Anna and Grace working on the council's budget, the prince evaluated the two exactly as aforementioned, particularly noting Grace had become more affable as of late. He's not sure what changed, but accepted it as a welcome development. He couldn't forget, of course, she was his fiancée. That being said, their engagement was only made out of necessity to the kingdom, and despite the fact that they've known each other since childhood, he had never harbored romantic feelings for her. He accepted their betrothal was for the best, since he was born to be the next ruler. There wasn't more he could ask for in a wife than someone who proved useful in bringing prosperity to the kingdom. With Anna getting stuck on calculations, Kenza pulled out his new abacus, claiming it was a calculator used in the Far East. Made by their house's most skilled craftsmen, of course. Grace solved the budget using the abacus with no problem, and I would explain how it works for you, if I knew how to use one. Anna was quite amazed at Grace's mathematical talent, despite Kenza's grievance mastering math work by hand before he had the convenience of a computer. Virgil stood up suddenly. expressing his astoundedness because Grace had always been vocal over her struggle with numbers. He wanted to know when she learned to handle them with such proficiency. Crap. Kenza realized he might have blown his cover, so he nervously made up the excuse he learned through a stroke of luck. Mere happenstance. He spoke of visiting the library one day, when a book suddenly fell off the shelf and opened to a page about the subject of dividing by 9. Supposedly, he had just happened to remember that page. As the prince reiterated Grace's mere coincidence, Kenza for sure knew he blew it, but took the focus off himself to say they should be acknowledging Anna, who demonstrated her usefulness by earnestly crunching all these numbers most people would find tedious. The prince was keen to Grace's tactic here, remembering she was a competitive woman who resented failure. He believed she conquered her shortcomings by spending long hours brushing up on mathematics in secret, yet was choosing to hide that fact, even going further by sharing the accolades with one of her fellow students. His stocks for Grace were going to the moon. Seeing she was talented plus humble, he started to think, wow, she's my fiancée? I'm starting to think she might be an unbelievable asset to the kingdom, sparkling 3 times in a row, and thus, the prince experienced a heart-pounding thrill like never before. While the members of the student council were always the talk of the town, one of the especially hot topics asked which one of them was the strongest. August was heavily favored due to being a guardian who specialized in martial arts and could augment his physical abilities with magic. The other top contender was Richard, a sword master who used mythical techniques of a fighting style passed down by his family. The two dueled, displaying an incredible performance that Kenza couldn't help but take notice of. His expectations were pretty low since this world was based on an ultimate game, but their battle had a real punch to it. It ended in a draw, when suddenly a bug landed on August's back. He asked Richard for help. However, Richard refused because bugs drove him buggy. Kenza then pulled it off, astonished to see it was a Miyama stag beetle, the superstar of insectum that all bug-loving boys loved. Its large mandible and distinct head shape was a work of art. He thought it was so cool. August thanked him and told Grace to squish it already. However, it'd be a cold day in hell before Kenza would choose to do something he found cruel and foolish. He wondered if the boys of this world didn't understand the awesomeness of bugs. But now thinking about it some more, he remembered catching and collecting bugs wasn't much of a hobby outside of Japan. He summoned a magic circle, writing the word return to send the beetle back to its home in the forest, then told everyone all living things were part of nature's grand masterpiece, and that taking the life of even a bug without good reason was unbecoming of those with noble blood. Her compassion made August's heart thud, and he and Anna sparkled. He wondered if he was falling in love, immediately lighting off 3 more sparkles. Later, Richard showed the girls the vault within the academy that housed priceless pieces of weaponry donated by many of the illustrious graduates. Keeping them in good condition was another important duty of the student council. For example, there was the holy axe known as Gargantua. He rambled on and on about the intricacies of the weapon, warning them that one must be careful when wielding it, or they'd have an accident. Next, he rambled about the enchanted shield, Archelon, of which anyone who attacked might find themselves between a block and a hard place. These puns were intentional. Virgil then whispered to the girls that the main reason Richard was always quiet was because he incessantly told dad jokes, and nearly everyone warned him against talking while out in public. Richard moved on to another pun involving armor, then swords, but Kenza countered with a double pun, saying a student council member wielding 2 swords could make a stab at giving the students a proper education. Richard was flabbergasted, believing Grace to be a true master with the multi-puns. He accepted defeat, and not long afterwards, rumors spread like wildfire throughout the academy that Grace reigned supreme among the student council. In a letter to Anna's parents, she explained she was doing great after her first month living at the dorms of the academy. She enjoyed the company of the student council, especially Lady Grace, who she described as a role model both academically and socially. There were also 2 additional gentlemen among the first-year members of the council. Prince Lucas Vierge, the second prince who was cheerful and sociable, always wearing a bright smile, and Lambert Balance, a man of great intelligence whose grades were among the very best. However, His attitude towards her seemed particularly stern for some reason, seeing him questioning why she hadn't finished tabulating her numbers when he already had. He condescendingly brought up how strange it was, since she had the highest marks on the entrance exam, and asked how she scored higher than him when she was slower. He accused her of slacking off, but thankfully, Kenza interjected to ease the tension. Since his tabulations were already complete, he used this opportunity to have Lambert add his to the rest instead of continuing to harp on Anna. After he left, Anna sighed, wishing she knew why Lambert hated her so much. However, Lucas didn't think Bert acted the way he did because he hated her. She didn't understand, so he elaborated. Bert was the current adopted heir to the prestigious Balance family. He was originally born as the third son of a bankrupt noble family out in the sticks. That made him no different from a member of the peasantry. But because he proved himself very smart from a young age and showed great promise with magic, he was able to enroll at the academy. Anna and Bert shared similar circumstances. Hearing this, Kenza surmised Bert must view Anna as a rival, and his attitude came from the fact he didn't want to lose to her. Anna thought being a rival meant he hated her even more. However, Kenza explained the opposite of affection to be indifference, not hate. The fact that she believed he hated her was actually proof he paid a great amount of attention to Anna. In Kenza's opinion, Lambert's route must be the easiest. There was nothing to worry about since his love flag was already set. Anna became quizzical over the word flag, thinking sometimes Lady Grace spoke of things she couldn't wrap her head around. Grace had a plan ready, but before that, scolded Prince Lucas about making paper planes in the council office, especially using important documents. The next day, with the help of an abacus, Anna was able to finish her council work in record time. Grace then pointed out how she was able to beat Bert to the punch, having taught her how to use the calculator. Bert questioned how Grace could judge him when they weren't calculating on level playing fields. However, Kenza gracefully explained there was no competition. They did tabulations to keep the council running properly. He then presented an extra abacus he happened to bring with him today, and offered it to Lambert, who accepted. Hook, line, sinker. He knew Lambert was the curious type. He then had Anna instruct Bert on how to use the device. This was all something Kenza had worked out with Anna yesterday, knowing tsundere characters like Bert were almost always total pushovers. Anna was doing her best to prove she could be useful to the council and the academy as well. And in typical tsundere fashion, Bert responded, well, I suppose if you insist, I'll allow you to teach me a thing or two, while flustered and lighting up. At this moment, Anna was euphoric. While she got the teaching, Kenza presented another abacus for Lucas to use. She wanted him to learn as well. That way, it'd give Bert someone to compete with for extra motivation. Kenza knew Bert was easy enough, but characters like Lucas were tough to get a read on, meaning his route must be difficult. Since he was more the mischievous type, he hoped his love flag was also properly set with Anna now, but then remembered maybe the Villainess shouldn't be trying to help complete love routes. Oh well, too late for that now. He had to scold Lucas once more, this time for strumming the abacus like an instrument. A month has passed since Kenza and Anna have been studying magic at the Royal Academy. Now they were stepping into a new stage of their magical education, as we see Anna summoning a Pegasus. The students' reception to Anna's beast was meh, because the particular creature was pretty common and unspectacular. Grenna appraised Anna's beast to have the win attribute, and Anna was very pleased. Kenza thought it was quite fitting for the heroine, and now after all this time of getting to know about the love part from the Magical Academy Love and Beast title, we flash back to where Hinako explained that beasts were servants like familiars. In this game, the protagonist is given a beast egg after entering the academy, where in a month's time, the egg would hatch. And since the beast has its own attribute, it allows the user more magic type options. Many players believe magic lessons only begin once they get to this part of the game. Also, the type of beast the heroine gets drastically affects the story and route she gets after. As Grace, Kenza praised Anna, asking if she'd be focusing on learning wind magic from now on. Some of the students got confused, bringing up that wind magic was good with earth magic, or water magic, maybe fire magic? They're clearly confused, so we can get a lore/tutorial explanation on the magic system of the game. Kenza played along, asking their teacher to give a quick reminder of how elemental attributes work, which also earned him a quick affection raise from Anna. So, 4 attributes: fire, water, wind, and earth. Fire and water counter each other, earth and wind counter each other. Water supports wind, wind supports fire, fire supports earth, earth supports water. Grena emphasizes the importance of support magic, because while fire in this world is effective against water-based enemies, against stronger monsters, the type advantage is not enough. So, with support from wind magic, the fire can strengthen and defeat bigger enemies. Kenza contemplated this, thinking about how in games he played before, he'd just reroll until he got what beast he wanted. He posed the idea to Anna, asking if it was possible to reroll, would she? Anna responded that she wouldn't, giving Kenza a fond reminder of his daughter. Then suddenly, Prince Virgil and August made their entrance. They were here to watch their fellow student council members summon their beasts. So of course, the two had to flex their own. Prince Virgil's beast is a griffin with wind attribute, while August is a Garuda with fire, both of rare species and incredible mana. The prince complimented Anna's honest beast, a reflection of its master. He believed it to be the perfect partner for her. August added it was up to the master to develop the beast's potential to its max. Kenza took this as the two guys' affinity being high with Anna. Standing in a summoning circle, Kenza thought back to a month ago where he stood before Grena to make a contract with his egg. The eggs were grown then by being supplied with mana from their masters. He was lax. Since the protagonist's beast had already been born, he didn't think anyone would take interest in the Villainess's beast. Little did he know, August wanted Grace's beast to be fire type. Virgil wanted it to be wind type. They'd be managing the kingdom as husband and wife after all. And Anna was wishing Grace's beast would be wind type just like hers. These three were interested in Grace's beast at the very least. As light burst from Kenza's egg, he thought back to Hinako telling him she wouldn't re-roll for beasts. She wasn't really the try-hard type to begin with. She felt like even though it was just a game, that it'd be a bit sad to make it like it was never born in the first place. At this moment, Kenza absolutely agreed, especially since the world he was in was real and couldn't be reset. He'd accept whatever beast was born, no matter what. But he never expected out of the egg to pop both a mini Kenza and Grace? They appeared to be sleeping. No one understood what was happening. Kenza overheard a girl's voice saying, Fuse it? How? Directly with my hand? He recognized it as his daughter's voice. A screen then popped in front of him, and from that, 2 hands came out, clasping the mini Kenza and Grace together, creating a mini red dragon. And while the event was certainly strange, everyone put what happened aside so that Grena could handle the appraisal. The teacher was shocked to discover the beast was an ancient dragon, a legendary beast, and it possessed both fire and water attributes. The prince was in disbelief. Everyone knew beasts could only have one attribute, but on top of having 2, it had attributes that directly opposed each other. Anna just took this as Grace being amazing, as usual. We moved to Hinako, 20 years old, born to an otaku mother and an otaku father. She was an otaku by blood. When doing a challenge run of Magical Academy Love and Beast the other day, she got a call from her mother giving the bad news that her father was in an accident. The doctor explained Kenza's head was hit hard. However, the test showed there was no damage to his brain and no noticeable external trauma. For some reason though, Kenza wasn't regaining consciousness, and based on brain scans, it seemed like he was in a state similar to dreaming. The hospital planned for more extensive examinations moving forward. Hinako tried to console her mother by looking at the bright side of things. She believed that one day, he'd probably jump out of bed and say, "You fool, Jotaro! I live again thanks to you." The mother played along, responding, "Yare yare. Looks like you're the real one." But weeb jokes aside, Hinako was sure her dad would be fine. She heard the kid he saved was alright as well, making her dad just like his favorite tokusatsu hero. She believed there's no way he wouldn't wake up. Arriving back at home, Hinako discovered the TV was already on with her favorite game, and weirdly, her controller wasn't moving the game forward like it normally would. The TV remote wasn't turning off the TV either. Looking closely at the scene where Anna had her first quarrel with Grace, the dialogue was strange, since Grace was telling the heroine her parents must have been very wise and caring. Then, looking at the name for Grace, it had in parentheses, Kenzaburo. She couldn't believe it. That evening, she explained it to her mother, sounding like a crazy person declaring her dad's consciousness to be inside the game, and her mother accepted it immediately. People from her generation read the novel The Never-Ending Story in middle school, then moved on to other countless isekai stories. Mitsuko wasn't going to allow her daughter to underestimate her credentials as an otaku. She watched Crest of the Royal Family, Mash and Hero Wataru, and NG Knight Ramune and 40 when they aired. Guys, I don't understand any of these references. She brought up Rei Earth, Fushigi Yugi, the 12 Kingdoms. She really was a fast-talking otaku. She brought up Mecha Isekai, OVA Isekai, Chronicles of Narnia. Too many shows that Hinako had to refocus her. Hinako then explained the situation as it appeared to her, where the choices that usually appeared weren't showing up. However, she could at least proceed with the story by pressing the A button and open the log containing the dialogues to previous scenes. They reviewed the moments Grace complimented the chef using her elegant cheat skill, dividing by 9, and the cringy dad joke about making a stab at giving proper education. That was enough to convince them it was totally Kenza. They now believed in order to bring him back, they needed to finish the game. So the next morning, when the mother had woken up, Hinako was still going, having played all night. She detailed the flow of time between here and the game world to be different, since just that night alone was already a month in Love and Beast. She then suddenly got a notice to lend a hand in Kenza's beast summoning. This was the first time in the story she'd been given the chance to do something. But she didn't understand, since beast summoning should be purely RNG without any help. There was only one choice in their minds with this. They had to help. That's when the mini Kenza and Grace appeared, and they were given the option to fuse a beast by combining Grace and Kenza's mana. Hinako had to do it by hand, and reaching in to do it, she couldn't believe the game meant it literally. While the principal found Grace's dragon to be fascinating, it was not his first time seeing one. He had even witnessed a beast wielding 2 elements as well previously. Kenza figured the strange ritual during the summoning had something to do with it. The principal then wanted Grace to test spell casting with the beast, and so, Kenza sent a fiery blast at a target, which was powerful enough to receive Anna's praise. But then, commanding Orion to shoot a water spell, the little dragon simply looked around quizzically. The principal thought of the name Grace had picked out for the dragon to be charming. However, she explained it was just the name that was written on its stats screen, and it also gave Kenza the option to change the familiar's attributes. No one else could see the screen, however. With the attribute switching, Orion's body changed from red to bright blue, and with Kenza casting the spell for shoot, Orion fired an intense hydroblast. And while switching Orion's form worked just fine, it seemed Kenza didn't know a way to use both elements at once. Now that the demonstration was finished, the principal pondered on why Grace's beast was the only one that manifested 2 different elemental abilities. To everyone's surprise, Grace willingly answered. She responded that she felt the presence of someone else inside of her, like a new soul had been born, distinct from the one she possessed before, her old self and current self. The combination of those 2 souls must have contributed to the creation of Orion. August couldn't believe it, but Virgil thought it made sense. He cited the drastic change in Grace's personality as of late. The principal, however, thought she was just taking a step into maturity by embracing a whole new version of herself. He had heard from her parents that she'd always had an acute sense of responsibility. Hence, she must have been driven by the need to successfully establish herself at the academy, and that inadvertently gave rise to a new personality within her. I think this guy totally missed the mark. Regardless, he spoke of an important responsibility she must fulfill. At the end of every semester, they hold an immersive learning event called the Magic Exhibition. Usually, only the most accomplished members of the student council are chosen to participate, which is why he personally wanted Grace to take part and demonstrate the power of her beast to everyone. Grace objected. However, Anna was over the moon for her participation. And so, Kenza accepted and the fellow council members offered their aid. Turning back to just after the beast summoning, Hinako and her mother were discussing what had transpired. The mother wanted to know more about the tiny Grace and Kenza, to which Hinako remembered the tiny Grace from her character introduction screen. Noting the combined powers, the mother remarked this was definitely one of those cheat skills that often popped up in isekai reincarnation stories. With the game requesting the player to name the dragon familiar, Hinako picked Orion. It was the name of a little dinosaur character from her favorite childhood anime that her dad always watched with her. She was hoping he'd realized she was the one who named it. However, he was dense, only surmising the staff of Magical Academy must also be fans of the same anime. Later, when the time was needed for Orion to switch to water attribute, Hinako needed to turn off autoplay and actually switch it manually. This means her dad needed her at the right times. Otherwise, he'd be stuck. She felt unsure of her ability to make it to the end of the game, and that's when her mom reminded her, they raised her. Hinako was invigorated with the belief and power of her otaku bloodline. They then moved to the scene where Grace explained everything to the principal and her friends. Kenza's inner monologue detailed this being a good opportunity for him to come clean and explained that he was inhabiting Grace's body. Hinako was concerned, remembering there was a branch in Virgil's route where Grace actually gets possessed by a demon and ends up fighting Anna. She was worried with her dad opening up that they might assume this all to be the work of an evil spirit. However, witnessing the elegant cheat skill proccing in action, it caused his explanation to come off as pretty ambiguous. In turn, pretty much everyone there misunderstood in a good way. This became the trigger for the magical exhibition event. Not bad by any means, but this was where Anna and her love interest got a big intimacy boost. However, the story didn't seem to be going that way at all. In the school library, a member of the drama club, Francette, was ecstatic over the different stories she had read that were tear-jerking. She thought about using some of the material as inspiration for the drama club's next big performance. To her, the library was pure bliss. She wished she could just live in it forever. Kinda reminds me of another bookworm that you could watch my video on after this one. She suddenly spotted Grace and Anna incoming, and this sent her into a starstruck rant. She thought of Grace Auburn as absolutely stunning. And then next to her, Anna, the Academy's first student of peasant blood because of her top scores. The valedictorian of valedictorians, Francette drooled with a bloody nose at the thought of their friendship that transcended the limits of social status. She ended up spilling over in a bloody mess. Grace's goal here was to study up on the finer details of magic and beasts. Kenza especially wanted more knowledge, considering he had so many questions about Orion. How it ended up with both water and fire attributes, or what those floating hands were during the ritual. He was also unsure about the voice he'd heard before as well. Kenza then noticed Virgil spying on them from above. Pierre then came running towards them, who, as a reminder, was the student council secretary and attendant to the crown prince. But Kenza completely forgot Pierre's name until Anna said it first. Pierre had come to them looking for Prince Virgil. Although he was an outstanding attendant who perfectly managed the prince's schedule and everyday affairs, he was also businesslike and adamant to a fault, which occasionally put so much pressure on the prince that he was forced to hide from him just to catch a break. Furthermore, when the old Grace learned of this, she blamed Pierre and often chewed him out. Just the pains of serving royalty. Pierre apologized for losing Virgil and swore it wouldn't happen again. But in return, Grace told him to look at the situation differently. Seeing as how Virgil avoided him, he should also be off the hook from serving the prince during these times. Kenza explained people were not designed to work every minute of every day. The more fatigued they become, the more the quality of their work declines. Taking breaks was key to ensure everyone stayed at their best. Pierre was stunned by the magnanimous perspective. Anna thought of the argument as genius. Grace complimented Pierre's work ethic, and Pierre was honored by Grace's words, although still a bit uptight. Kenza then asked about study materials for beasts. However, Pierre's knowledge on the subject was unfortunately too shallow, so the girls had him present his beast at the very least. Named Pollux, a water-type gargoyle. Anna noted that with the prince having wind attribute on his beast, Pierre's water type was probably the perfect support. He proudly served as the prince's support during last year's magic exhibition. Pierre then extended his helping hand anytime to Grace, knowing she'd one day be married to Virgil. However, Kenza wasn't quite so certain, since there was no guarantee Grace would end up as his wife until they were officially married. Virgil wouldn't take this quietly, jumping down from the second floor, asking what his fiancée meant by her words. Bad move though, because Pierre had been looking for him the entire time. Anna wondered how he was able to hear in on their conversation. So, the prince explained it was because of his wind magic. He could create tunnels of air that carried sounds from far away. Taking notice of the prince's skill in wind magic, Kenza pushed Anna onto him, suggesting the prince teach her all about it. Kenza was trying to lead Anna further along Virgil's route by raising their intimacy level. The prince accepted gracefully. However, Anna tried to modestly decline. So, Kenza felt like this was a good chance for him to play the Villainess. He told Anna, "Oh please, would you get down from your high horse? This training is not meant for your benefit whatsoever. I am merely thinking ahead to the magical exhibition where I expect you to serve as my support. I will not stand for an assistant who only knows second-rate magic." This definitely had the opposite effect Kenza was going for though, only making Anna more excited and affectionate, knowing he was choosing her as his assistant. Everyone supported Grace's kind words, making Kenza wonder why this always happened. August and Richard began their battle of the beasts, fire versus water, blow for blow. Hinako and her mother were amazed seeing the fight choreography, as the battle scenes were incredible despite this being an Ultimate game. The boys were doing a mock battle for Grace because she'd never seen a magic exhibition before. Hinako had to give it to her dad. Despite him being 52, he swallowed his pride asking kids younger than him for coaching. Mitsuko remarked that Kenza had always been a boy at heart for as long as she'd known him. He used to always say, "Age doesn't matter. Anyone with skill is worth learning from." He was constantly amazed seeing talented artists pop up as high schoolers within the otaku industry. Hinako wondered if her dad's personality was the very reason his mind was guided into the world of the game. Thanking the boys for their demonstration, Anna pointed out since the two had opposing elements, their battles were always quite the impressive display. Richard told the girls not to tell anyone, because their battles were secret information. Kenza pointed out how August seemed to specialize in defense while Richard in offense. That's what made the two a special pair, even in magic. They were both proud and destined to be commanders in the royal knighthood. One would be the shield, and the other the sword. They've trained extensively to fill those roles since childhood. Noticing Anna's praise of them, Kenza considered keeping their routes available for Anna to follow. Anna then pointed out the cliffside that had been damaged from the exhibition. There seemed to be big bones from some kind of creature inside the cliff. Kenza at first observed them to be dinosaur bones. However, August had no clue what that was. People in this world refer to them as lost bones, and legend has it, they're a result of someone's failed attempt at creating monsters. August personally didn't think of them as anything special. His explanation made sense to Kenza, because back in the day, people used to call dinosaur bones on Earth ill-fated experiments of God. The scientists of this ultimate must have settled on a similar conclusion. August then called for Anna to try hitting the cliff with her magic. Summoning Sirius, she shot a powerful gale. Even the boys were surprised a new student could showcase such skill. They were a little disappointed since the exhibition they put on was the same as last year, and could now see they'd hardly made any improvements since. And while the clash between water and fire may be flashy, they'd barely managed to tap into the true potential of their beasts. Kenza could see using fire magic only for defense was a huge waste, and Richard's icicle shots didn't seem to capitalize on his sword skills at all. He wondered if there was a better way to call in the power between beast and sorcerer. Then suddenly, out from the cliff bursted a skeletal monster. With August blocking the attack, the boys called the beast a dragon skeleton. These bones were a type of monster. Not dead at all, actually. Kenza then concluded that Anna's magic likely was the reason this monster awakened. Her magic was so powerful, it drew monsters near her. With the monsters going for an attack, August blocked again. The boys wanted the girls to head back to the academy for assistance. They were going to hold it off. Kenza knew he and Anna hadn't undergone any combat training yet and might get in their way. The girls began to run off, but stopped, seeing the boys weren't handling the monster too well. So, looking at their magic circles, Kenza considered inscribing spells to evoke the best of both the boys' abilities. Grace drew the words sword for Richard and shield for August, and their beasts changed to a shield and sword. They didn't even know beasts could do that. August shot an intense flame, while Richard finished with an icy slash, vanquishing the enemy. The boys thanked Grace for her help, but Kenza assured them it was just a stroke of luck that she knew the perfect spells to inscribe. He wasn't expecting them to take a knee and swear unwavering loyalty to him. He wasn't asking for all that, and also wondered what that sparkling light that happened all the time was about. Hinako explained that happened anytime an intimacy meter got a boost. I was right. Kenza wished they just aimed their affections at Anna instead. The courtyard of Royal Magic Academy is furnished with a barrier that prevents any spells from going outside of its walls. Thus, it is used as a training ground for students to practice magic. Here, Kenza and Anna summoned Orion and Sirius, combining magic to create a fiery tornado. Greta observed Anna's wind magic serving to fan the flames of Grace's fire. Both she and the principal were excited to see next week's magic exhibition. After practice was over for the day, Kenza became fixated on Orion's peculiar behavior. He noticed the dragon trying to emphasize something more than once. This was frustrating Hinako. She wished there was some way to send her dad a message to let him know she was watching him. The fact that she could see what was happening in the world of L&B means she was probably supposed to do something to help her dad beat the game, but the only thing she could do now was switch Orion's attributes between fire and water. She then noticed the music changed and 3 sprites approached her father, wanting a moment of his time. Hinako then realized these 3 were the snobby NPCs who were a part of Grace's entourage in the regular version of the game. The 3 pointed out it was quite a bad look for an esteemed daughter of a duke to entrust a lowly commoner like Anna with such a key role. Rumors were flying all over and putting Grace's reputation at stake. Some have gone as far as to suggest it wouldn't just cause the duke to lose face, but become a blight upon the whole academy. Hinako noticed the 3 snobs' art suddenly got bigger. Did the resolution actually improve after her father got more familiar with characters? One of them then brought up that Anna Doll was a charlatan who spoke ill of Grace behind her back, and that Anna's relationship with her was for nothing more than to reap the benefits of nobility. She boasted to all her plebeian friends about how she buttered Grace up. All the lies started really pissing Hinako off. She pressed a button on her controller out of anger, causing Orion to let off a flame that scared the snobs. Hinako wondered if that actually did control him or was just a coincidence. After getting the 3 girls' names, Kenza turned it around by telling them all of his conduct was closely tied to the reputation of the noble families they came from, warning them if they weren't careful, someone might get the impression that the 3 of them share anonymous gossip as a way to scare and mislead others. This made the 3 snobs reel back in nervousness before Kenza took off. Even Hinako was impressed by how unfazed her father was, now writing the snobs' names on his fan. In the student council room, Lucas and Bert were intrigued by Grace's purchase of a new wand, so Kenza showed off his wand incorporated within his fan. He thought it was bothersome to walk around with both a wand and fan, so he had the family craftsman make it for him. Lucas wanted one too, until Bert pointed out how strange it'd be for a guy to carry a fan. So Anna suggested maybe fitting it into a briefcase or the spine of a book, and when opened, a magic circle written inside could pop out. Bert was drawn to this, imagining his 8th grader syndrome fantasies of using magic via a spellbook, all a part of the other 3's plan to entice him. Bert was seriously asking Grace to get in touch with her family craftsman, and Kenza was fine with it. Lucas then brought up how talented Anna and Grace were for getting selected for the magic exhibition in the first semester during their first year. Even August and Richard weren't that talented, having been chosen during their 3rd semester. And while Kenza explained he was lucky for having a special beast, it wasn't luck that he chose Anna to be his partner for the exhibition. Bert was green with envy, and if Anna didn't perform, he'd definitely take her spot next time. Kenza was joyful seeing such young rivals who respected each other. Lucas then switched from his whimsical demeanor to seriously tell Grace there may be problems for Anna in the future. The academy was part of aristocracy. Naturally, not every student around was as sympathetic and understanding as they were. Kenza could see it very clearly, with the 3 snobby girls chastising Anna, telling her to resign for being Grace's assistant. The snobs told Anna that Grace had told them she was tired of having the stench of peasant girl on her, that Anna was a huge nuisance who couldn't understand pecking order. They kept going on, until Anna brought up her family ran and owned a bakery, a very successful business, one that garnered many connections with people throughout the town. One piece of advice her family gave her was, be wary of anyone who claims to know that someone else is slandering you, and keep your distance from them, because if they are willing to vilify others behind their backs, they will undoubtedly do the same to you. Kenza was impressed. He could tell Anna was raised by loving parents who wanted the best for her. As a fellow parent, he had the utmost respect for them. Anna then began her march, telling the 3 to follow so that they could all ask Grace's true opinion of her. The snobs were frantic, trying to save their tails by saying Anna could get expelled or humiliated in front of everyone. But even if that were truly the outcome, Anna didn't care. She'd still cherish her friendship with Grace. She wouldn't lose even an ounce of respect or appreciation for her. Kenza and Hinako were in tears over how sweet Anna was. He suddenly stepped in, causing the snobs to panic, reminding them of what he had told them earlier. He then apologized to them, saying he had spoken far too roundabout earlier, leading to this misunderstanding. Hinako knew her father was trying to avoid chastising the three in order to prevent problems in the future, so he chose to make it seem like everything was his fault. That was his polished social skills at work. He made it clear that he thought there was no difference what social background everyone was from, because every student was here to learn. They were all kindred spirits meant to better each other. The ladies were all impressed by Kenza's magnanimity. He wanted them to all band together as students, and they totally agreed. At the Auburn estate, much upkeep is required to maintain the beauty of its grand mansion and sweeping garden, so there are a great number of servants who live and work on the property, and the man who employs them all is none other than Duke Leopold Auburn. Inside of his home, he was happy to see his daughter was well. When he heard she fell off her horse last month, he was so worried he could hardly sleep. Kenza knew this man as Grace's father, as well as the kingdom's minister of finance. His work often keeps him away from home, and this was his first time back in about 2 months. He was everything one would expect from a man who stands at the top of high society. He just turned 45 years old this year. This actually makes him younger than Kenza, and that kind of made Kenza feel bad. Leopold presented a gift for his daughter, a fine rocking horse he happened across in a town thriving of woodworkers, letting out a belly laugh over the joy it gave him. Kenza went through Grace's childhood memories, understanding she used to love rocking horses when she was really little, and so Leopold must have chosen this gift without realizing how much time has actually passed. Oh man, if the actual Grace had seen this, she would have freaked out. Probably would have said something along the lines of, "Do you think of me as a baby that still cries goo goo gaga in your mind, father?" However, Kenza humored the father as Grace, telling him she was flattered he remembered, because she was having trouble coming up with a suitable gift for her little cousin, Francois, who's turning 5 next month. Grace even saved her father from indignity, telling the servants there's no way her father got this rocking horse meant for children for her, a 15-year-old girl. The servants cheered Leopold's intelligent move to help Grace get a gift for her little cousin, while having no idea this wasn't his intention at all, and he just went along with it. And thus, the servants' loyalty stat towards Grace received a huge boost. Walking through the estate with Josette, Kenza thought about Father Leopold missing the mark as a father usually would. He struggled to keep up with his own daughter's changing interests when she was growing up as well. They were bringing treats to Meister Waltz as a thank you since Grace had him working on another new project. Overhearing the shouting of men, they spotted the father and Waltz having a top battle. Kenza was surprised to see they had toys like these in this world, but maybe he should be more surprised to see Grace's father goofing off. Not even Grace had any memory of this. How could a distinguished gentleman take interest in a game that lowborn kids play out in the streets? That aside, it seemed like the two men were old gaming buddies. Leopold felt he screwed up by giving his daughter a horrible gift, but understood Grace stepped up to gloss over the situation and saved him a lot of embarrassment. It was a bitter pill for him to swallow. He felt this was why he was unfit to be Duke. After all, he was just the second son of a noble family from the boonies. Kenza dug through Grace's memories, remembering it was actually Grace's mother, Jacqueline, who comes from the prestigious Auburn family. Whereas Leopold was highly valued for his talents and got adopted into the family through marriage. Perhaps he still struggled with an inferiority complex, despite rising the ranks to Minister of Finance. As a man, Kenza sympathized, but that was still no excuse. Grace made her presence known, and Leopold became nervous, shrinking back. But he wasn't expecting his daughter to accuse him of hogging all the exciting entertainment to himself. Grace wanted in on the merriment as well, admitting she's been visiting the Meister frequently as well, but wanted her father to keep that a secret from her mother. As the two bonded over spinning tops, Grace explained she didn't care if her father was born from a less prominent family in the countryside. Leopold cherished his family and work, while faithfully adhering to the responsibilities of his station. That made him more splendid than anyone else around. However, with Grace knocking out her father's spinning top, Leopold wondered how she was so good at the game. Kenza made an excuse, claiming it to be beginner's luck. Looks like he was so pumped, he forgot to hold back. We turn to Anna waking up peacefully in the morning. She tries to put on her skirt, but seems to be struggling. Today is the day they start their practical magic exams. She hurried, apologizing to Grace for being late even though she arrived right on time. Kenza noticed her scuffed ribbon tying and fixed it right up. And Hinako couldn't believe her father's Mademoiselle moves were getting so sharp. Elegant Cheat was pulling a lot of weight, but it was also the fact that he was such an adaptable person. The mother joked about him getting his body back and still having some of that mademoiselle left in him. The mother and daughter moved along, discussing the important event, the end of the first semester exam. The normal students had to simply demonstrate magic in front of an examiner, but the most exceptional students had to display their skills in a live show with an audience of guests. We see August and Richard showing off their new beast skills, putting on an incredibly intense battle and wooing the crowd, while from above, Leopold was watching and remarking he'd never seen beasts become weapons before. The principal then came by, mentioning it was Grace who helped make that happen. Soon after, Grace and Anna took the stage. Grace told her two upperclassmen to stand as their kneeling might confuse the other students. However, August and Richard were following the knight's code of chivalry. Leopold was quite surprised to hear his daughter taught the two boys their new skills. The principal pointed out Grace had a talent for nurturing others' talents and abilities, even helping out the commoner student, Anna. With Professor Grenna presenting 3 guagnos, it was time for the exhibition to begin. Virgil thought it was strange how Grenna had chosen such difficult monsters. Pierre explained new students were usually tasked with hitting immobile targets for their first test. Multiple flying through the air seemed like a bar that was far too high. Summoning Orion to shoot a fireball and Anna supporting with wind to make a flaming tornado did just the trick though, engulfing all 3 targets at once. Granite wasn't done though, merging the 3 monsters into one. Kenza shot a test fireball that had no effect. He realized since the skin had burned off the monsters, their attributes changed from water to earth, and so he called for Orion to switch to water attribute. Hinako responded, and Kenza explained this plan to Anna, who was to take the lead with her spell. He reminded her that water supported wind-type magic that was super effective to earth. Anna was super nervous. Hinako was worried too, considering Anna had pretty low stats at the beginning of the game, and it was especially difficult considering her HP and MP were limited. She might be out of MP, but still, Kenza gave encouragement and faith to Anna, and Anna embraced it, shooting a cyclone. Kenza then had Orion shoot a freezing spell, creating a giant blizzard in combination with Anna's. Now that the monster was frozen, both he and Anna made a final strike with a dramatic finish. The crowd went wild. Afterwards, the student council congratulated the two. Leopold added his praises as well, introducing himself to the exceptional commoner student he had heard so much about. Anna got nervous, hearing the additional praises from Grace as well, and she was quite humble, claiming Grace was the reason her spells were so strong, and suddenly burst out that she started putting on extra pounds, much to the daughter and father's confusion. Hinako recalled an event where this happened in the game. She found a log labeled, "A Determination to Diet," and we see a scene where Grace told Anna she had hardly any food on her plate. The food was so good, Anna had been going a little crazy with the portion sizes, and that really hit her waistline to the point she could barely fit into her uniform. In the old days, Kenza's gut reaction to this would have been to tell his daughter that losing weight at such a young age would leave her with weaker bones later in life, or that young ladies were more attractive with a little meat on their bones. But after living in the body of Grace for about a month, he understood a young girl's perspective much better. He told Anna to be careful not to sacrifice her health just to lose a few pounds, but then claimed he was sad because he was fond of seeing a big smile on her face whenever she ate food. This came from his bad habit of being a dad who liked to treat younger people out to eat. Anna couldn't stand to see Lady Grace making such a heartbroken expression, so she grabbed more, thinking the words, "Eat as much as you can, when you can." That's how commoners did things. She went hard to eat her fill, and decided she'd work it off with exercise. After that happened, she started jogging every morning and night to burn calories while taking lessons in magic and fighting from her upperclassmen. It helped her build a ton of stamina. She put on so much muscle, her skirt felt tight this morning. Kenza complimented her work ethic, but Pierre praised Grace for motivating Anna to better herself without any pressure or chastising. Her father was impressed. Virgil knew Grace would bring prosperity to the kingdom. August thought she was cool. Richard thought of her as angelic. At this point, Kenza had caught on that this special glow was their intimacy meters getting a boost. On another morning, Bert and Anna were having a dramatic clash with their magic. His earth and her wind canceled each other out, just like what they had learned in class. He was especially happy to use his new magic wand book Grace's family craftsman made for him. It was even better than he imagined. He was so passionate in his rant, he caught himself, turned red with embarrassment, and recomposed. 1 week has passed since the magic exhibition, and right now, Lambert, Anna, and Prince Lucas were paying a visit to the Auvergne estate. After seeing Grace's magic fan, Lambert expressed interest in an altered wand himself. So 2 weeks ago, she reached out to Meister Walls to combine a wand into a book. And with Anna invited as well, this was a good chance to make some progress on their route. Grace pointed out that although both Anna and Bert were polar opposites in elemental magic, their rapport with each other was surprisingly good. Prince Lucas concurred, adding that their contrasting personalities might actually make them a good match, since they naturally offset each other's shortfalls. Over tea and desserts, the friends discussed how Bert's book wand was customized after the fundamentals of magic circles. He spoke of his childhood growing up in a relatively poor noble family way out in the borderlands. But even then, his parents never skimped out on providing him a proper education. His older brothers were blessed with fighting skills, so the parents provided good horses and weapons for them. And since Bert was fond of sorcery, they gifted him this book. His fondest memory was his first successful spell. He used magic to make flowers bloom on a dying tree. That's when it hit him. With this book in his hands, he could assure that his life would bloom with great flowers of prosperity. Going into dad mode, Grace commented that Bert's parents must be proud. Anna agreed, but Bert thought her parents must be even prouder of her. Uh-huh. She's blushing. Is that love in the air? These two did come from similar backgrounds. Perhaps the Lambert route was the most realistic option for Anna. She was of common birth, while Lambert was from a fringe family of minor nobles. Not to mention that Duke Auvergne has roots in a noble family from the countryside. Maybe it was fairly normal in this world for those of lower status to rise up the ranks through their demonstrable skills. So perhaps there was even a possible way for Anna to become the queen through Virgil's route. Kenza noticed Anna hadn't eaten any of the food yet, and turns out she's never had fancy desserts like these before, so she didn't know how to eat them. Wait, doesn't her family own a bakery? Oh, she didn't know proper manners when eating. Lucas switched the topic to summer plans, and we learned Anna planned on staying at the dorms for as long as she could, then go home to visit family when the school was closed. But Lucas said that'd be a huge waste. A better summer vacation opportunity would be for Grace to let her stay at the Auvergne estate to learn firsthand how to live life as an aristocrat. Anna didn't want to impose. However, Kenza pointed out how she had yet to fully grasp the reality of her position. She could one day stand at the highest echelons of the kingdom, so she needed to prepare herself by at least learning basic rules and manners. Anna was astonished. She knew the highest echelon was royalty, and that the crown prince was already engaged to Grace, concluding that Grace wanted her to join the ranks of the royal court to serve as a lady-in-waiting. Anna was excited to learn the ins and outs of upper-class etiquette with max-level motivation, even though this was a misunderstanding. Kenza eventually found himself walking within a strange place, a quiet and empty space. Orion came to him, calling Kenza his dad and to follow him with Hinako's voice. But Kenza just assumed it was normal for the dragon to call him that, since he was the dragon's parent in some manner. He found Grace within a cage, but didn't know what to say at first. He thought the best thing to do was to free her, but touching the cage, it started to glow. And then he woke up grabbing onto Anna's arm. Josette asked her master if she had a nightmare, but for Kenza, the dream was a blur. He was then surprised to see Anna in a maid getup, but we learned that today was the day she was to be trained with the maids. Having viewed it all, Hinako was caught off guard by the dream sequence. She wasn't sure what the deal was with Grace being stuck in the cage, but it had to be some kind of important clue. This was leading to a story totally unique and separate from the main plot of L and B. Usually, during Anna's first summer vacation, the game only offers two choices where she either stays at the dorms or goes back home to visit her family. And of course, the choice the player makes changes how the romance scenarios unfold. Anna going to the Auvergne estate wasn't a choice before, but regardless, being the main character, it should only take her a few days to master all the fundamental manners and customs of being a high-class lady. Anna wanted to learn how to fulfill all the duties of Grace's servants. Kenza presumed it was probably important for her to know, since she'd likely need to employ her own servants in the future. But the two were definitely not on the same page by any means. Since Miss Matilda was the only one who could style Grace's hair, Anna and Josette were in charge of making the bed. Josette suddenly plopped onto the bed, but this was not to goof around. She learned from the head maid to always consider things from the master's perspective. So unless she lied down like Grace did, she couldn't assess the firmness of the bed, or make sure the ceiling was clear of problems. Anna tried next but quickly became caught up in the comfort and wonderful scent of Grace's perfume. It's like she was melting in her embrace. She snapped out of it, wiping her drool so they could move on. Hinako was getting worried about this route. Sitting down with Matilda, Anna wanted to know the secret to making Grace's hair. So, Matilda happily answered that she used her native enchantment. It was a special type of magic that beastkin were born with. She'd been using it ever since she was born, but it's not a type of magic that could be taught to others. In fact, not all beastkin were born with the ability to use magic either. Matilda's enchantment could heat up anything she held in her hands. The heat was intense enough to boil water, but not to shoot flames or anything. It was lacking in many ways, but she knew it could prove helpful to somebody. Her first idea was to use it for ironing. She originally wanted to use it to get the wrinkles out of all sorts of things. There were many madames with chic outfits who became her biggest customer base, until one day, she was taken in by the dame of the Auvergne estate. That's how she started working as a servant in charge of ironing. The pay was good enough that she could feed all of her siblings. She felt like she owed everything to Duchess Auvergne. Back when Grace was an infant, she would often visit the maid quarters and always watch Matilda iron clothes with such fascination. Except one thing always bothered Matilda. So one day, she asked to help with Grace's hair. She had always helped her younger siblings style their hair since she could warm and cool locks of hair with her magic to make them curly or straight. Grace loved Matilda's work. So she styled her hair ever since. It even got her a pay raise. She truly felt blessed for having been born with this enchantment. Josette had never seen Grace mad at Matilda once, even during her scary phase. But Matilda never thought of Grace's anger occurring without a good reason. Later, Olive, the head maid, introduced herself as Anna's instructor moving forward. She began with Grace's background, detailing her older brother Lord Adrian, who was currently studying abroad, and mother, Duchess Jacqueline, who was currently recuperating at the family villa. In other words, only Grace and her father were here at the estate. At this very moment, though, there were 300 servants working. The Auvergne estate sat on a large plot of land. Therefore, the servants were split into two groups that housed craftsmen and gardeners, who either operate inside or outside the mansion. Those who work inside were a housekeeping team, who took care of all the cleaning and laundry. Since the Duke's official residence was often used to hold fundraising parties that support public funds, the interior must always be kept in pristine shape. Then, there was the cooking team, whose job was to provide meals for their masters, but also cater food for all the servants every day. Next, the administration team was responsible for all business affairs and bookkeeping. They also had specialists who managed the apparel and cosmetics used by the Duke and his family. Moving outside, the gardening team took care of all the landscaping. The majority of these servants lived on the property with their families. The ranching team took care of the horses and cows, and the agricultural team grew grapes to make wine. By the end of the day, Anna was beyond impressed with all the work required to run the estate. It was more of a small community than a residence. Even Hinako wasn't aware of any guide that explained the estate to this level of detail, which made sense since you'd never typically dedicate that much lore to the family of the Villainess. Hinako always had a sneaking suspicion that this wasn't just a video game world, but perhaps a real world that strongly resembled the game. Anna and the maids were suddenly met with Grace in a maid outfit as well, giving Anna much surprise. Hearing Anna compliment him with, "You look great," Kenza presumed Anna picked up on his hidden message where him becoming a servant to her was plausible. However, all Anna was thinking was that Grace exuded elegance that made her look stunning in any outfit, totally on different pages. Turning to a more serious beat, Kenza asked how watching the servants made Anna feel. Did she think something like it was beyond excessive for a single family to have over 300 people serving them? Anna responded that she was shocked at first, but turned to Josette, who'd been learning how to do the job ever since she came here. During this time, Josette learned how to work, read, and write, and also how to handle money. So in other words, Anna learned this estate was not only a place where servants worked for a decent wage, but also a school where younger servants could learn how to live. Although parties were held in the mansion and gardens here may seem like lavish entertainment, they were a fundamental part of the Duke's job to enrich society. The Duke fostered a sense of community by employing a great number of servants, who then earned the money needed to support their families. It all came together like its own tiny kingdom. Kenza took Anna's hand, praising her, saying it was worthwhile bringing her here. He believed Anna would one day stand among nobility to better the lives of everyone with her influence. Anna thought the same thing about refining her talents. But again, The two of them had different ideas on who would be queen. The Royal Magic Academy was out for summer vacation, but Grace and Anna were still attending school, specifically for the underground vault, which was filled with weapons and magical gadgets that had been passed down through the Academy's history. There were magical barriers erected to protect the vault. However, they lost most of their power during the full moon in midsummer. That's where the student council stepped in to perform inspection and do upkeep. Anna was a little concerned at first, but Grace assured her things would be fine so long as they continued to follow their upperclassmen's lead. Upon seeing the rest of the council, Lucas solved one of the magical gadgets that looked like a Rubik's Cube, shining a bright light, and now all the guys were gone. The two girls wondered where everyone disappeared to, and Anna figured out quickly that everyone had gotten stuck within the strange box. Kenza knew it was indeed a Rubik's Cube, and hearing Anna had no idea what it was, it became clear that Rubik's Cubes didn't exist in this world. They believed seeking faculty would be the best course of action, but now found themselves floating in space. The door then disappeared before them. Kenza surmised the device must contain an advanced form of earth magic that could manipulate space. He remembered the colors matching earlier and tried to solve one side, bringing Virgil out from the cube. He explained the magical gadget was known as the Labyrinth of Trials and had been kept here at the Academy for many decades. Normally kept under a barrier, today was of course the day barriers were nearly powerless, and Lucas happened to fiddle with it, making all sides of the cube match, causing the trigger to activate the labyrinth. There must be a way to deactivate it, and that way suddenly dropped right before them. On the basket, Virgil read, "What am I? Behold the deluge above and the blaze below." Anna and the prince didn't understand the concept, and that's when Kenza realized this world had no concepts of riddles. He brought up the idea of a brain teaser, and assumed since this trial was a part of this world, he needed to use magic to show the answer. Summoning Orion, he filled the basket with water and heated below with fire. The answer to this brain teaser? A bath, of course. Virgil and Anna were taken aback by Grace's genius, and Anna believed only she could have solved the riddle, given Grace was the only one who had the two correct attributes for magic. Hearing this, Kenza realized the puzzle was probably supposed to be solved through the cooperation of two people. Oh man, this puzzle was meant for Anna to figure out with one of her love interests. But instead, he was increasing their affection meters. Entering the next room, Virgil was suddenly sent back into the cube. The sides were all mixed up again. Kenza's bet was this event probably randomly summoned one love interest for each trial, so they could get an intimacy boost with Anna after clearing. The only problem was, Kenza knew he couldn't solve more than one or two sides of the cube at best. Solving a side again, Lambert made a dramatic entrance. He thanked them, having been able to see everything that was happening from the other side, and knew they just needed to solve these trials. With the next trial beginning, Anna read, "It walks on 4 legs in the morning, 2 legs in the afternoon, and 3 legs at night. Exemplify this creature atop the stones." Quite the classical riddle. Kenza knew the answer was obviously human, but wasn't sure how to exemplify that on the stones. He was losing his mind, hearing the other two still had no idea what the answer was. Wanting the two to progress their relationship, he gave them a hint that allowed Anna to solve the riddle quickly. Then, Bert pointed out the stones and used his beast to have them fill the holes. Now they just needed to stand atop the stones on 4 legs, 2 legs, and 3 legs. But realizing Grace might have to get on her hands and knees for one of them, Anna tried to take her place, but got stopped by Bert, who offered himself to the position instead. 4 legs in the morning, 2 in the afternoon, and 3 at night. They solved the riddle. Before heading to the next puzzle, Grace expressed her gratitude to Bert, calling him a shining example of what an aristocrat should be. He just did his part as a gentleman and asked to be summoned again for the next trial. Unfortunately, Grace had no intention of that. Hinako couldn't believe this was the game's summer vacation. She had a bad feeling the ending result of this would be everyone falling harder for her dad. She needed to find a way to have him solve the puzzle so they could finish the event before that happened. During the next trial, Pierre figured out how to solve it quickly. So, Kenza suggested Pierre use his water magic on the rings above. However, we learned he has a crippling fear of heights. So, Kenza took this on instead. Solving the trial, Pierre returned to the cube shamefully. Solving 2 sides at once for the next trial, August and Richard came out at the same time. The two were curious about this trial, and suddenly saw a tiny Lucas on the porch of a tiny house. With him going inside, the riddle appeared. This hut is home to a traveler. What makes the traveler shed his cloak? prove that it is not the cold winds, but the shining sun. Apparently, Anna knew this one. They had the fable of the north wind and the sun in this world. Richard started beating a drum, since it was customary in the south to bid travelers farewell with a song. The tiny Lucas opened the door, but then, when Richard started singing, Lucas ran back inside, not enjoying the singing at all. Kenza then decided to go next, given he had his fair share of experience playing drums because of a certain rhythm game. He then sang the Galaxy Express 999 by the band Go Diego, a song from the late 70s I had no idea about, but after hearing it, I'd say it's pretty good. Lucas came out dancing and they solved the trial. The friends didn't know how many more trials they'd have left, but they continued with Grace taking the lead and raising their affection meters. Hinako's worst fears were coming true. After the guys got sent back to the cube, Kenza wanted to solve all 6 sides. Hinako wished she had some way she could help her father. She remembered back in grade school, when asking him for help with a Rubik's Cube, he admitted he was not smart enough to solve every side, but now remembered a trick he had taught her for solving. Orion suddenly came out, and Hinako was surprised to find she could control this part of the game. She had Orion snatch the cube and dismantle it, just like her father had done back in the day. And now, they could put the pieces back on where all the colors would match. Kenza even remembered it was just like he had done with his daughter. They repieced it together. However, the cube didn't accept this method. Having seen the core of the cube though, Anna was determined to solve it herself, and did just that, and everything was restored. Seeing everyone congratulate Anna, Kenza was pleased because she was probably getting a big boost for all the men's intimacy meters. However, with them all staring at him, Anna was grateful for all the hints Grace had given her. And the guys knew Grace had the know-how to solve all the puzzles, but instead, intentionally left hints to give Anna the chance to learn instead. Oh man, the entire building was raising its affection for Grace. The biggest special effect for an intimacy boost Hinako has ever seen. Some kids were chasing down this girl's hat that was blowing away from a strong breeze. Luckily, Anna got it down using her whirlwind magic. The kids were amazed. They were impressed by the magic she had learned in the big city. A local nun she knew was also just as thankful. Anna was here for summer vacation, and had decided to pay a quick visit to her parents before school started back up again. It was Grace, her good friend, that actually recommended this trip. She had said, showing your parents a cheerful smile is the most rewarding thing you could do for them. They were all alerted by the noon bell, and Anna was excited, knowing Grace would be visiting soon. But little did she know, Grace was already here, watching from the sidelines. Reaching the bakery, a strong gale blew past Grace and Josette. The two peered inside, wondering if the gentleman working was Anna's father. Kenza could see the man's sharp movements and the discerning gleam in his eyes. Even from behind this window, it was easy to tell Anna's father was an honest-to-goodness artisan. Josette's stomach started to growl loudly, so she apologized. But Grace said there was no need, as the delicious aroma coming from the bakery would make anyone hungry. Hearing this, an older, pink-haired woman called Grace's statement some mighty kind praise. Obviously, knowing who this woman was, Kenza replied politely, but nervously. Anna's mother gave them cone-shaped bread with chocolate cream, and Josette enjoyed it, sparkling. The mother then brought up that they came up with this bread after hearing stories of Grace, and Grace wondered how the mother already knew who she was. But the mother just laughed, replying there was probably only one upper-class mademoiselle who'd bother visiting their little old shop. She went on, adding that Anna couldn't stop talking about her in her letters. It was always Lady Grace this and Lady Grace that. Kenza knew writing letters was one of Anna's hobbies, but he wanted to advise her against oversharing his personal information from now on. But anyways, after reading about how beautiful Grace's golden curls were, it gave the mother the idea of making bread with a similar shape. Grace then blurted out they were chocolate cornets. But of course, the mother had never heard that term before, so Grace just said that's what these were called in a kingdom to the far east. Grace was still curious about Anna's mother picking up that she was from an upper-class family. She had thought her merchant's daughter disguise was pretty foolproof, to which the mother answered it was obvious, given Grace was so elegant, and the superb tailoring of her clothes were a dead giveaway. Hearing this, Grace pointed out that the mother being well-versed in the behaviors of the upper class, despite knowing Grace had aristocratic status, she showed no fear or deference at all. Meaning, most likely, Anna's mother was originally born into a family with deep ties to nobility. The mother got nervous, calling that ridiculous, but it was clear to the other two she was lying. and not very good at it. They suddenly heard a scream coming from the town square and rushed over, spotting a boy who got stuck high up in a tree. He supposedly climbed up there to fetch some laundry that got blown away, and now he couldn't get down. Josette pointed out that this sometimes happens amongst young beastkin. Many of them didn't know how to think ahead, which led to problems since they were stronger than humans. The wind suddenly blew the boy away, but luckily, Anna reacted fast enough with her wind magic to save him. Grace then approached Anna, with little time to explain why she was with her mother. We learn Anna's magic is probably no good to bring the boy down, because a bigger wind spell would be far too destructive inside. Grace then considered a basic float spell, but the boy was far too high for her magic to reach him. Seeing the flowing water fountain, the mother had the idea of saving the boy using a chocolate cornet. She shouted at the townsfolk to clear the way because a rescue team of 2 bright students from Royal Magic Academy, Grace and Anna, were here to save the day. More oversharing. Anna fired an intense whirlwind, and Grace followed up using water from the fountain to make it flow alongside, creating a spiral of ice. Using the wind magic to carry her voice, Anna told the boy to simply ride the ice down like a slide, and the boy made it safely into his mother's arms. The people hollered and praised Anna for being the pride of their town. While Kenza was certainly impressed by Anna's improvement, he was more curious about her mother. The idea to create an ice spiral similar to that chocolate pastry wasn't something she could conceive without knowledge of magic. She couldn't just be a simple villager, and he further suspected this secret was relevant to beating the game. He felt troubled by the idea of this though, given the mother was a normal person with her right to privacy. With Anna passing the praise from herself to Grace Auvergne, the people were surprised that a member of the nobility would go out of the way to help them. Grace felt like Anna was taking this a little too far, but Anna gleamed, letting everyone know Lady Grace would help make this place a better kingdom for everyone. All their affections for Grace were raising. In the real world, Hinako explained the campus festival to her mother. It was a big event held during the semester after summer vacation ends. It was similar to the cultural festivals they had at Japanese high schools. In the original L&B game, it was an event where Anna and her love interest successfully performed a skit or activity that helped foster their relationship. And of course, this was normally where the big bad Grace would become a huge problem, by using excuses like, "It's not traditional enough," or "It's not dignified enough." She acted as a gatekeeper who found a way to reject everyone's plans for the festival. With Grace looking over one of the proposed festival plans for a maid cafe, the proposing student thought she was going to reject it for sure, on the premise of not meeting the Academy's standards. But everyone was shocked, hearing her say the idea was wonderful. Her thought process? As members of nobility, they needed to recognize maids as a fundamental part of life, and running a cafe that imitates the work they do should help give the student body an even greater appreciation for them. Later, Prince Virgil and Pierre arrived to check on her evaluations. So far, Grace has approved everything. Pierre wondered if she should be choosing more rigorously. He thought the maid cafe, for example, was a little too undignified. Grace understood his concerns, but brought up novel ideas almost always appeared undignified or indecent because they couldn't be judged by current standards. Kenza's reference? Programs that the PTA often tried to ban children from watching were the ones with innovative characters or fresh takes on comedy. Virgil took this akin to when new works of music or art were almost always universally panned when first introduced to the public. Lambert then came knocking, bringing up some students who had submitted a request for use of the auditorium. And as Grace was taking her leave, Pierre warned her that if things went awry, she'd have to take responsibility. But she was more than glad to take the blame. Noblesse oblige. She believed that's what she should do as a noble. And the girls were lighting up over how cool Grace was at this moment. There was more to it though. He knew if something bad enough happened to ruin Grace's reputation, it could put an end to the engagement between her and the prince, which in turn would open the door to the route where Anna marries Virgil instead. The mother was shocked at how he'd already come up with a backup plan. He really was a bona fide gamer. The council had been working non-stop all morning. Lucas asked if they had decided what activity they were going to perform for the campus festival. It was still up in the air, and Grace reminded Anna it was customary for the first-year valedictorian to take the lead in choosing the student council's activity. She was having trouble though, given she'd never seen the campus festival before and didn't know where to begin. So, Grace responded that their upperclassmen on the council were very popular, and an activity that showcases them would probably go over well. This gave Anna the idea to have them host a play. She remembered seeing a local festival in her hometown, and there was a play there about a series of events that lead the prince of a kingdom to befriend a young commoner. until they end up swapping places through a magic spell, causing quite the conundrum. Kenza knew this was a common trope in fairy tales, and found the idea of this play to be rather amusing. Lucas then remembered a special rule student council members had to follow when performing a play. For instance, when they chose music, they had to use magic to move the instruments instead of playing them normally. He didn't know exactly what the rule was, but it was a tradition to handicap the student council, since they were the cream of the crop. Having dinner with her father, Grace explained how things were at school. It made the father nostalgic, thinking back to when he had to make sure everything was ready for the campus festival too. The butler then blurted out they had received a letter from the Duchess, who'd been recovering at the villa. She's in good health now, and should be returning home soon. Kenza contemplated this, since he hadn't met Jacqueline even once. He was especially nervous, wondering if the mother's maternal instinct might tip her off about a change in Grace's personality. Chatting throughout the night further, Duke Auvergne mentioned it was none other than the Duchess who came up with the special student council rule for plays. She created the rule during the year she was student council president, and it helped make their performance a huge success. The special rule had become tradition ever since then. Anna was shocked to hear the rule was cross-gender casting. A girl was to play the prince, while a guy was to play the princess. Kenza felt the bar was a little high for them, but had no choice but to follow since it was a rule created by Grace's mother. Hinako already knew the rule, but there had been no backstory about the Villainess having a connection to the rule's creation. In fact, Grace's mother never came up in the game at all. Hinako's mother was excited to see the boys cross-dressing though. Both mother and daughter were. Grace imagined Richard and August cross-dressing. Not a pretty sight. Their shoulders were so broad. Anna believed Virgil and Pierre would certainly make pretty ladies though. Lambert would be quite the intellectual beauty. Then, with Lucas running in, they imagined just how cute he'd be. Quite the natural fit even. Anna was frantic, hearing she'd be playing the role of the prince. But, remembering Grace would have to cross-dress as well, she got crazy excited. Anna would perform as long as Grace was in.
The student council was wrapping things up for the campus festival. Grace was working everyone to the bone. They couldn't have anyone falling behind on schedule. However, they hadn't seen Anna in a while. Grace went to the library, finding Anna completely worn out and exhausted. She's been working hard to compile information on plays by reading books about them. It somehow took her the entire day. She realized she was starving and fell over. Ending up in the infirmary, Grace ensured Anna was in good care. However, Anna was feeling both bad and useless. She didn't realize how complicated plays were. It was more than just actors and scripts. You needed a script, director, costume, stagehand, lighting, sound effects, set pieces, and props. So many things had to be done, and she thought it'd be best to start preparing the script for the play. But no matter how many books she read about playwriting, it proved too difficult for her. She cried, believing she was nothing but a failure. Grace consoled her, admitting stage plays were indeed complex works of art. She apologized to Anna for not giving clear instructions. She never meant for this to happen. Although she asked Anna to be in charge of the stage play, she never expected her to do everything on her own. Kenza felt remorse. Knowing Anna's personality, he felt like he should have seen this coming. He then told Anna, as the saying goes, let the cobbler stick to his last, or in more colloquial terms, let the baker be the one to bake the bread. The two met up with the theater club president, since they needed someone familiar with playwriting, and that's when he introduced Francette, who was stunned meeting Grace. She was in fact a really big fan of the student council. With the club president reminding her to introduce herself, she began to kowtow, begging them to spare her family. She's definitely a little dramatic. After getting a rundown on the situation, Francette wasn't confident in her ability to help. However, the club president pointed out she was definitely the brightest amongst the club members, and their club was already centered around their senior students. He believed it would be best if she worked with the council members. Anna was amazed, learning Francette was also a first year who had already earned the respect of her club president because of how extensively she studied the art of theater. Until Anna mentioned the cast was going to be cross-gender. She was now ready to be at their every beck and call, and even be worked like a horse. Getting to work, Anna was more surprised to learn Francette has read every single play that's been done at the school. She gave them a stage version of a play they wanted to perform, bringing Anna to tears of relief. This is what Kenza meant by letting the baker bake the bread. It reminded him of the old days of when he had to ask professionals to help him bridge the gap in his knowledge, and it was also where he met his future wife. He believed this was the key in bringing any large project to fruition. Francette was surprised. Even though Grace was of much higher status, she felt like they had a lot in common with each other. Anna commented that the cast and dialogue seemed almost too on the nose, as if this script was written with the current members of the student council in mind. Even so, the dates inside seemed to indicate it was written 30 years ago. Perhaps they shared the same characteristics as the student council from back then. But looking at this particular piece, Francette could tell no one had actually performed this show yet. Seeing the playwright, Grace pointed out it was her mother, Jacqueline. This is when Francette joined the party officially. Hinako explained that Francette was supposed to be Anna's best friend, who meets her right after the entrance ceremony. With Anna dressed up, Francette was elated, taking tons of pictures through one of the latest magical gadgets called a camera. Hinako knew its function was to screenshot in the game. Then, when Pierre entered in a maid outfit, Francette exploded with a bloody nose. Prince Virgil's queenly look sent her exploding into fireworks. The two boys began to joke around, never imagining he'd be queen before becoming king. Either way, it was a feast for Francette's eyes. We learned the costumes were all hand-sewn by the Auvergne family tailors. It was hard on Virgil's hips and lower back, but he had to make do with it. Grace then gave a rundown of the play. There was the main character, Anna as Toby, an impoverished peasant boy. Then Grace as Edmund, the crown prince of the kingdom, coincidentally born on the same day, but of course, raised in very different circumstances. Richard played the sickly mother of Toby. One day, Toby chanced upon Prince Edmund in front of the gates to the palace, where he got invited inside. The two boys conversed with each other. The prince wished to experience a day in the life of a commoner, while Toby wanted to live in the castle. That's when the prankster fairy named Fee appeared. She used her magic to make the two switch bodies and quickly exited. The prince ran through town as Toby until he was caught by a corrupt merchant who tried to sell him into slavery. Toby announced himself as the prince and got saved by Marielle, a dame who was on her way back from the battlefield. Meanwhile, the queen fell very ill at the palace, prompting her to try and abdicate the throne to the prince before it was too late. Inside the palace, the queen's younger sister, Simone, carried out a scheme to steal the throne, believing her son was better suited. The council had only 2 weeks until the campus festival. They've held off practicing because Francette was rewriting the script per Grace's request. 1 week later, Kenza's come to realize that he and Anna had to portray two separate roles. He had to play Prince Edmund and also Edmund who had the mind of Toby. Kenza had no problem acting as Edmund, but really struggled playing Toby. His words always came out with an air of nobility. Elegant cheat was preventing him from speaking as a commoner. Later, coming home after meeting with the girls, Grace's father had a note from her mother, who was over the moon learning she and her friends would be performing the play she wrote at the campus festival. Jacqueline even planned on seeing it herself. The pressure was on now. Kenza was going to spend every minute he could reciting his lines. Unfortunately, the students only became busier the closer the campus festival loomed, which naturally left the student council absolutely swamped with responsibilities. A festival was likely going to start without them ever having the chance to rehearse as a group. Even though the festival was a joyous occasion, it was clear Kenza was quite nervous. He wanted to get as much practice in as he could. However, he and Anna would get called out by Mrs. Dahl with a joyful greeting. There was a loud crash. It seems the Earth Magic Enthusiasts Club was presenting a live golem fight. But Grace had to remind him that displays of magic were prohibited outside of the designated areas. The club students tried to reason with Grace that this was all for promoting their club, but then the golem got quickly dismantled by Grace's father. And with him giving them a small scolding, the club boys panicked and apologized. Josette could hear the sound of a party from afar, and knowing the area was supposed to be totally performance-free, both Grace and Anna took off to make the performers uphold the rules. Watching them leave, Duke Auvergne and his butler commented on how Grace was the spitting image of Jacqueline in her younger years. The Duke turned, suddenly seeing Anna's mother curtsy and gesturing him to keep quiet about seeing her. In the halls, Grace and Anna were walking after politely shutting down the unauthorized festival performance. As Kenza, he had Grace, since back when he was a college student, he held a few surprise performances during his school's cultural festival too. They had only 1 hour left until their stage play, and still, he wanted to make final preparations. Francette opened the council door, and welcoming the two in, all the council boys were waiting for them. They acknowledged just how hard she had been working to make this play happen. Grace bowed in response, offering her apologies because there were still many lines she couldn't say properly. Prince Virgil could tell she still struggled to speak like a commoner. He assured her no one was going to give her a hard time, and believed the manners of the upper class had been drilled into every fiber of her being. Kenza was thankful
and commended his ability to accept the struggles of others at his young age. No one was expecting the play to be perfect. They were all going to do their best to make things work. The auditorium was a full house. Kenza and Anna spotted Grace's mother sitting right beside her father. Lucas came by, saying he had spoken to Duchess Jacqueline earlier, but before he could say what she said to him, the buzzer rang, signaling their time to start. As the play began with Anna's intro, Virgil was ready to feed her lines if she forgot with his wind magic, but Grace told him to hold. Anna delivered her lines perfectly, accurately capturing the character of a commoner boy who had a positive outlook on life. The audience was totally into her performance right off the bat. She had all the talent one would expect of the main character. Kenza always seemed to forget he was supposed to be the villainess of this world, so he had no reason to be concerned with drawing enough attention on stage. He could let Anna have the spotlight while he focused on playing second fiddle. When he stepped on as Prince of the Kingdom, his performance was flawless. The two got to the scene where they expressed switching societal roles, and with Lucas arriving as a pretty fairy, all the girls in the crowd squealed. Bert used his Rose Tempest spell for effect, and Anna gave her lines as the prince within the commoner boy's body believably. However, when Grace gave her lines, she could not capture the commoner boy's personality, causing the crowd to become somewhat distraught. Lucas then improvised, saying as a bonus, he casted a little spell that made the commoner boy speak princely as well. He was saving the play. However, he couldn't take all the credit though. It was Duchess Jacqueline who passed him a note saying to use that line when he met her earlier. And Kenza was surprised at how perspicacious Grace's mother really was. Did she know about Elegant Cheat? She must have. It was already strange that the script was written over 30 years ago. Prince Virgil played the role of the elegant and dignified queen, while Pierre a seasoned maid, and Auguste a valiant dame. Every role in this play was perfectly written to match the current members of the student council. This couldn't be coincidence, meaning Jacqueline must have some kind of spell that gave her foresight. Watching, the Duke complimented his daughter's excellent performance, telling his wife Grace truly was their pride and joy. The Duchess shed a tear in response, and the Duke could tell something was up. The play reached its climax, where Lucas had to switch the souls of the two boys back, and the crowd roared, teary over the incredible performance. Backstage, Grace thanked everyone for making this play a success, but everyone turned it back at her. They believed she was what made this play special. She replied humbly, and let them know that this was going to be a day that lived in her memory forever. And everyone, one by one, glowed with an affection level increase. In the evening, the Duke congratulated his daughter on the performance. Grace asked where her mother was, and her father responded she had to leave for an important errand. However, she did leave a letter for Grace. It read, "My darling Grace, I apologize for not being able to see you in person, but I thought your play was simply fantastic. I couldn't be more proud of you, and I'm overjoyed to know that you've surrounded yourself with so many wonderful people. No matter what challenges you may face in the future, I believe you can find a way to overcome them by working together with your friends. Know I'm always thinking of you." In her carriage, Jacqueline was getting a scolding from a magic orb, telling her she should have taken a little time to see her daughter. She desperately wanted to, though. She wanted to smother her beloved daughter with hugs and kisses badly, but knew the time just wasn't right yet. If they met now, their plan would fall apart. Hinako was disappointed that the game ended without them getting to meet Grace's mom. Following the game, she knew there should be an after party that triggers an event where you match the fireworks with the love interest that you've made the most progress with. Anna looked all over campus for Grace, and Kenza knew that, which was why he stayed hidden. He could tell this after party would be a crucial turning point for her love life, depending on who she spent it with. He wanted her to forget Grace and watch the fireworks with one of the boys from the council instead. Anna expressed her worries to the rest of the council about being unable to find Grace. With 30 minutes left before the fireworks show began, they split up and decided to look for her, searching as hard as she could. Anna remembered all the times she spent with Grace, and by the time the show started, she saw the fireworks with the rest of the council, but never found Grace at all. However, Prince Virgil noticed the fireworks were a mix of red and blue. The color of their academy's magic fireworks depended on the attribute of the spellcaster, meaning Grace had to be the one shooting them. Kenza had no idea who Anna was watching the fireworks with, but he was certain their intimacy must be boosting right now. Little did he know, the council members' affection meters were increasing, but only for Grace. He still couldn't make sense of why he would get reincarnated into this world, but the role he took on was to support all the youngsters who called this place home. His life as the big bad Villainess had only just begun. Oh man, what a peaceful ending to this series. But now, there are so many leftover questions. Like, what was Jacqueline's plan for Grace? What was Mrs. Doll's ties to nobility? Why was Grace's consciousness in the cage during one of Kenza's dreams? Will Kenza even make it back to his family? If this ever gets a second season, I'll be sure to cover it. Subscribe to the channel for more, but for now, watch this next video. It's me, ComfyTea. I'll see you all in the next one.